Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about kind of just a spring overview. There are a ton of different things to get to, and we'll get to that over the next couple of weeks. We'll definitely talk about different reports from spring ball, all these different stuff that will start unfolding. And the biggest thing that we're going to be watching is the QB battles. That's obviously going to be the big time topic of conversation over the next 2 months, 3 months, maybe even into fall camp for a couple of these, because there are some really interesting battles as we get into this. And let's go ahead and jump in because there's a lot to get to. There are about 6 teams I have here. Frankly, I could have had a seventh, but I talked about it. I don't think Georgia is that much of a battle. I do think it'll be Gunnar Stockton in 2025. Ryan Puglisi will have something to say about that, and we can talk about that in time. Maybe it'll be a little bit more of a battle than I'm thinking of right now. But let's go ahead and start in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Keelon Russell's got to get this one right, plain and simple. If he does not get this one right, they miss the CFP again, and Bama fans get really frustrated very quickly. I think they were okay with a 9-win season. I don't think they were super happy about it, but I think they understood that some things were getting in the way of this team being downright elite. There were some things that were just going to be tough this year, regardless of if it was Nick Saban or Kalen DeBoer. The reality is it was Kalen DeBoer, and it was a messy year. There's no doubt about that, at least in terms of Alabama standards. I think a lot of different teams would trade places with them in a second, but the reality is, as you go into next year, you have Ty Simpson, you have Austin Mack, you have Keelon Russell. Those are your three options. Ty Simpson, the most experienced of the group, at least at Alabama, has been the backup for a couple of years behind Jalen Milroe and played some pretty good football when he got in there in some different spot starts. Obviously, not the greatest of competition that he was getting in against, but still a very talented kid, can throw the ball all over the yard. Austin Mack, a guy that came over with Kalen DeBoer from Washington to kind of be the third string backup kind of guy, and played at times last year, not a ton. Definitely a guy that has a big time upside. Hasn't quite hit that upside that you would love to see if you're an Alabama fan. And then Keelon Russell comes in as one of the most talented freshmen in the entire country. I believe he ranks anywhere from 1 to 3 on any of the recruiting sites out there. Very, very talented kid, and someone that I think just about anyone in the country would love to have on their team. Alabama does, and it'll be really interesting to see what he can do throughout this spring. But as of right now, Ty Simpson will be your favorite. There's no doubt about that. He's going to be the guy that a lot of people are circling. I'm circling someone else. I'm going to pick Austin Mack to take this job. I think Austin Mack is the guy that gets the start to start the year. I think Keelon Russell could finish the year, and that's something we can unpack a little bit further on. Obviously, that would take Alabama losing a couple of games, so maybe things go a little bit sketchy for them. But Austin Mack is the only quarterback that Kalen DeBoer has recruited twice. He has found a way to get him to Washington the first time around, and then brought him over from Bama, and he didn't do it just to have him sit on the bench for multiple years. I really do think Austin Mack is a very, very talented player. Bringing in Ryan Grubb back is definitely a huge step up for him because he understands the offense a little bit better than Ty Simpson or Keelon Russell will, with him being at Washington before this. So it'll be an interesting thing to watch. There's no doubt about that. I think Austin Mack wins this one. I think him and Ty Simpson are probably battling into fall camp, if I'm being totally honest. I don't think this one's remotely decided before fall camp, but I also think Keelon Russell is one of those guys that if they lose 1 or 2 games early in the year, let's say they're 4-2 in 6 games, or they're even 5-2 in 7 games, I do think we're going to be talking about Keelon Russell pretty quickly, and that kid is just otherworldly talented. So it's going to be rather hard to keep him off the field. And once you put him on the field, you're not getting him off. I can almost promise you that. Moving over to Michigan, another team that they got to get back on top. That is the ultimate goal of this season, and these are going to be the two guys that possibly bring them there. We'll start with Mikey Keene. He comes over from Fresno State, actually played Michigan last year, and very experienced, very confident quarterback. Has played 4 years already, walks in right as the savior of the program walks in, which is Bryce Underwood. He will steal the headlines, and the reality is, I think it's Underwood's job. I really don't think there's any other way that this can go because again, everyone knows the price tag. Everyone knows that you paid $12 million to get this guy on campus. Everyone knows he's probably making somewhere in the ballpark of $3 million this year. He better be your starter, and he better be ready to roll. And the reality is, I have no worries about this kid. I think he will be the starter. I think he will play very good football for them. I think he will be more than fine. I'm not super worried about Bryce Underwood not hitting, if I'm being totally honest with you. That being said, there's a lot on this kid's shoulders, and if he does start, there's going to be a lot of people hoping that he is Superman right from the jump. I can't necessarily promise that, but a very, very talented kid. I just think it has to be his job more than anything else. I don't know if that's necessarily the right way to go about business, but the reality is with that type of price tag, I think that's your starter, and I don't think there's much argument elsewhere. Moving over to their rivals, Ohio State, the team that they'd love to beat for a sixth year in a row. Wow, that's insane. But getting back to this, Ohio State has three guys that I think are contenders for this job. Julian Sayin, Lincoln Kienholz, and Tavian St. Clair, another freshman that is coming in like Keelon Russell and Bryce Underwood. Very talented kid. Really remarkable, built like an NFL quarterback right about now. Really talented kid, and he will be the future of this program. I feel pretty confident in that. Don't think he's going to win the job this year. Now, he's going to be an interesting thing to watch. There's no doubt about that because he could very easily be the backup going into next year depending on how this spring goes. But I think the reality of this one, I'm not going to waste a lot of time. It's Julian Sayin's job. If it's not Julian Sayin's job, then something went very, very wrong throughout spring and summer and fall camp that he is not the starting quarterback. Whether that's injury or him just not playing the football that they expected of him, it will be Julian Sayin. I feel fairly confident in that. He gets a little bit more back to that CJ Stroud, little, pocket passer type ability. Ball comes out of his hand like it's a slingshot. It's really, really fun to watch, and he's a very talented kid. I have very few doubts that he's going to be a very good player for them. Now, he's thrown into the fire with Texas right away, so it's going to be really interesting to see how he handles that, how quickly he can get his feet under him, but at the end of the day, incredibly talented kid, and I think those other two guys, while very talented, I think they're a step behind this one, and I think especially Lincoln Kienholz, I think he might be fighting for the backup position more than he's fighting for the starting job throughout spring. Notre Dame, they have three guys on the board as well, and they have a very deep quarterback room going into next year. Really like what this group is built of because I think you have Steve Angeli, the very veteran guy, the guy that understands the offense, that's going to make the right play, that's going to put the ball where it needs to go. Then you got CJ Carr, the very talented sophomore that you really love, definitely brings a little bit different ability to the offense, has a little bit bigger of an arm, is a little bit more of that pocket passer type guy. And then you got Kevin Minchie, a very talented kid that has kind of just been overlooked throughout this process. A really, really talented guy and definitely someone that could just steal the show throughout this next little bit, give them a little bit different of an ability on offense and maybe be the guy that steals the show here. I think Angeli is the safe bet here. I think everyone understands that he is the guy that understands this offense. He is the veteran of this group. He's the guy that a lot of the people in that locker room probably gravitate towards most easily. I just think CJ Carr is going to steal the show. I really do. I think CJ Carr is an absolute freak of nature. I think he is a guy that can throw the ball so comfortably from the pocket. I think he has a little bit more of the athletic ability that you don't get from Steve Angeli, although Steve Angeli can move, no doubt about that, but I think CJ Carr is your guy, and I think some of it might be you don't have the 2025 that you really want to have, you don't get right back to the national title, but you have a guy that's fully ready to go going into 2026. Now, that's a bargain, one way or the other. If you think Steve Angeli can get you to the CFP, possibly get you back in a chance to win a national title, then you throw him out there. But the way that I see it, I don't think Notre Dame's getting to a national title regardless. I'd play CJ Carr and just let him lead me the next couple of years. I think he'd be very, very happy with the results of that. He's an incredibly, incredibly talented kid, and I think he's just one of those that he's going to get on the football field this spring, and it's going to be really hard to not give him the job by the end of it. Colorado, one of the teams that everyone loves talking about and everyone loves having an opinion on, one way or the other, very aggressive one way or the other it seems, but we have two guys that are very, very different quarterbacks and very interesting choices as we get into this spring camp for Colorado, Caden Salter and Julian Lewis, and two guys on two totally different spectrums when it comes to the way they play football and the time that they've played football. Caden Salter going into his fifth year in college football, played some good football at Liberty, definitely in 2023 was a downright incredible player, looked like he was going to be the big name on the market during the transfer portal, put his name in, dropped out, went back to Liberty, and didn't quite have the year that he wanted to have. Had some injury troubles and seemed like he had some injury troubles. I shouldn't say he definitely did. There was some talk about him having injury troubles. Nothing concrete. I'd be surprised if it wasn't, if I'm being totally honest with you. He turned over the ball a lot, did not bring that running ability that he really brought in 2023. I think it's going to be really, really tough for him to play that poorly again, frankly. I think Caden Salter is a very good player. I like Julian Lewis a lot. I think he's a very talented player. I think it's going to take him some time. And I think you're going to have to start Caden Salter to start this season. I do think it's a week-by-week proposition, though. I will say that. I think Caden Salter is a very talented player. I'd be very surprised if he was not the starter going into that Georgia Tech game to start the year for the Buffaloes, but at the end of the day, Julian Lewis is a very dangerous guy, and is a guy that if you can get him up to speed a little bit quicker than you're expecting, if you're sitting at 3-3 after 6 games or 3-4 after 7, I think a conversation will be had. I think Julian Lewis will take over at that point. I don't know if they'll get to that point. Hopefully they will be a really fun team and definitely have improved in a number of different places, but the reality is you're replacing one of the best quarterbacks in the country last year in Shedeur Sanders. I think you have two very talented guys. I don't know if you have one that's going to replace him entirely. So you better be able to run the ball a little bit more effectively. Yet another reason why I think Caden Salter has to be the choice here, because he makes that a little bit harder on the defense when you know the quarterback can run. There's a number of different things to kind of take into account here. The reality is I just don't think Julian Lewis will be there quite yet. I don't think he'll be ready to start right away, and I think Caden Salter will be. So I think he gets the start against Georgia Tech. Cannot promise he will get the start at the very end of the year, because Julian Lewis is a very talented, very dangerous player, and if it doesn't go according to plan in the first month and a half of the season, you could definitely see Julian Lewis a little bit earlier than I'm projecting right about now. And then we'll finish it off with Oregon. And this one kind of falls under the same category as Georgia with me. I don't know if there's much of a competition here. Now, I love Austin Novosad. I think he's a very talented player. Came in a year ago, one of those guys that you really love the tools. There's so many different things that he can do incredibly well. I think like Dante Moore last year, I think you just benefit from sitting 1 year and getting some of those spot reps in some different games that you're up a lot in, or it's all the way over, whatever it looks like. Just finding a way to get him on the field is going to be super beneficial, but at the end of the day, it's Dante Moore's job. Let's just be totally honest. This is Dante Moore's job to lose. He is the quarterback I might be most excited to see that is not named Arch Manning. I think all of us are very excited to see what Arch Manning can do, but Dante Moore, I cannot wait. He's a very, very talented thrower of the football. If he is half of what Tez Johnson was saying he was going to be, he's going to be a really special player, and he will be the starter for this team. Now, can he hit the ground running is going to be a really interesting conversation, but the arm talent is different in every sense of the word. Learning from a guy like Dylan Gabriel did him a ton of favors this past year, and the reality is, when you have a kid with that amount of talent, I don't think you keep him on the bench for more than 1 year. So I do think it will be Dante Moore's job, much like I think it's going to be Gunnar Stockton's over there in Athens. I don't think these are huge competitions. I think they're interesting things to watch, and maybe, Ryan Puglisi down there in Athens or Austin Novosad up there in Eugene will steal the show, but as I see it right now, maybe Akili Smith Jr., who knows, will steal the show up there in Eugene, but as of right now, I feel pretty safe saying that Dante Moore is going to be the guy you're going to be watching for the Oregon Ducks next year. But overall, these QB battles are going to be weird. There's no doubt about that. I think the two that I'm going to be watching probably most closely are the one in Tuscaloosa. That's the number one to me, because Kalen DeBoer's got to get it right. One way or another, he's got to find his guy, and whether it's Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, Keelon Russell, or maybe they go get a guy in spring portal, which is a dangerous proposition. There's no doubt about that. And then Notre Dame is going to be a fascinating one. In the title last year, you have Steve Angeli that's been there for so long, understands the offense, very, very professional player, and then CJ Carr, that upside player that's so much fun to watch, and then Kevin Minchie, a guy that a lot of people have written off by this point. I wouldn't write him off too quickly. Very, very talented, very athletic kid that I think could make some waves in this spring practice and maybe just steal that job for the Fighting Irish. But overall, those spring battles are going to be fascinating to watch, and we'll continue to update those. Maybe I'll update some picks as I get a little bit more information throughout the spring practices. But as of right now, that's what I got for my spring picks. I do think it's going to be Austin Mack over there in Tuscaloosa, as crazy as that might sound right now. Although I think a couple of these young guys like Keelon Russell, Bryce Underwood, and a couple others are going to make some waves here pretty quickly. But we'll talk about that in time, obviously update you throughout and see if any of the guys are taking huge leads or just a little bit of a lead in some of those QB battles. But let's take our break here. When we come back, we got to go away from spring camp just for a little bit. We got to talk about the ACC. Florida State, Clemson, and the ACC have settled their suit, which means a lot of different things. And we got to get into all of the different things it means right after this, so stick with us.